Have you ever thought about how tragic Remus Lupin's fate truly was? What if his life was even harder than Harry Potter's, filled with pain, loss, and sacrifice? In today's video, you will discover the untold struggles of one of the most tragic characters in the wizarding world. Remus Lupin's story is one of sorrow and resilience. Born a half-blood wizard, his life changed forever when a cruel revenge turned him into a werewolf at the age of 5. His father's careless words against werewolves enraged Fenrir Greyback, a future Death Eater who attacked the young boy, cursing him with lycanthropy. From that night on, every full moon became a nightmare, transforming into a beast, craving flesh, losing himself in an uncontrollable hunger. His parents feared he would never be accepted into Hogwarts, but Albus Dumbledore gave him a chance. A secret sanctuary was created for him, the infamous Shrieking Shack, where he endured lonely, painful transformations. Despite his fears of rejection, he found true friendship in James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew. They did the unthinkable, became animagi to support him through his suffering. For the first time, Remus felt he wasn't alone. After school, his life took a darker turn. The war against Voldemort raged on, and he fought alongside the Order of the Phoenix. But one by one, he lost everything. James and Lily were murdered. Sirius, his closest friend, was branded a traitor. Peter was presumed dead. With no family, no friends, and no future, Remus wandered in despair, struggling to find work. Society saw him as nothing more than a monster. Isolated and broken, he withdrew from the world. Then Dumbledore returned with an offer that reignited a spark of hope. Remus became a professor at Hogwarts, teaching defense against the dark arts. He was a brilliant teacher, beloved by students, but the past came crashing back. When Sirius escaped Azkaban, everything changed. The truth unraveled. Sirius was innocent, and Peter was the real traitor. Yet before justice could be served, Remus made one fatal mistake. He forgot to take his Wolfsbane potion, lost control, and transformed in front of everyone. His secret was out. Fearing he had put students in danger, he resigned. Once again, an outcast. When Voldemort returned, Remus rejoined the Order, risking his life as a spy among werewolves. He met and fell in love with Nymphadora Tonks, but guilt consumed him. Could a werewolf have a family? Could he protect them? Despite his fears, he and Tonks married and had a son, Teddy. For the first time in his life, Remus had something to live for. But happiness was fleeting. The final battle for Hogwarts began, and he fought bravely. He faced Antonin Dolohov in a duel that would be his last. His wife, Tonks, perished soon after at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange. Their newborn son was left an orphan, just like Harry. Remus Lupin was posthumously awarded the Order of Merlin First Class, the first werewolf to ever receive it. His death marked a turning point in the relationship between wizards and werewolves. His life was one of endless struggle, loss, and sacrifice. He was a man who had every reason to give in to bitterness, yet he remained kind, brave, and loyal until the very end. And that is what makes him one of the most extraordinary characters in the entire Harry Potter series. Have you ever thought about what would have happened if Remus Lupin had survived the Battle of Hogwarts? What if he had lived to raise his son and witness the world finally changing for werewolves? In today's story, we imagine an alternate path for one of the most tragic characters in the wizarding world. The battle ended, and silence fell over the ruins of Hogwarts. The bodies of the fallen lay scattered across the Great Hall, but Remus Lupin still drew breath. His duel with Dolohov had left him battered, his body trembling from the curse that should have killed him. But fate wasn't done with him yet. A young witch, barely a 7th year, found him among the wreckage and used the only healing spell she knew. It wasn't enough to restore him completely, but it kept him alive. When he woke, the first thing he saw was Harry Potter standing over him, eyes wide with disbelief. The world had changed overnight. Voldemort was gone. The Death Eaters had either fled or surrendered. And yet all Remus could think about was Tonks. He struggled to his feet, pushing past the aching wounds, searching desperately through the chaos. He found her among the fallen, her face frozen in an expression of determination. She had fought until the very end, just as he had known she would. His heart shattered, but he couldn't allow himself to grieve. Not yet. He had a son. Teddy was safe. Andromeda had hidden him away, far from the battle, but now that it was over, Remus had to see him. He left Hogwarts before the celebrations could begin, unable to bear the weight of the victory when his own world had been torn apart. When he arrived at Andromeda's house, she opened the door with red-rimmed eyes. She had lost a daughter, he had lost a wife, but neither could afford to break down, not when a small, innocent child was sleeping upstairs. The first time Remus held Teddy, he felt a deep, unfamiliar fear. The tiny bundle in his arms had his mother's hair, changing colors as he shifted in his sleep. He looked so peaceful, so unaware of the cruel world that had taken his parents before he was even old enough to remember them. And in that moment, Remus made a silent promise. He would not let his son grow up the way he had. Teddy would know love, safety, and a father who would do everything in his power to be there for him. But rebuilding a life was never easy. The ministry was in shambles, and while the war had ended, prejudice hadn't disappeared overnight. Remus found himself back in familiar struggles. No one wanted to hire a werewolf, even a war hero. He had fought for this world, bled for it, lost almost everything for it, and still he was seen as a risk. But he refused to let anger take hold. He had a child now. He couldn't afford to be reckless. The only place that welcomed him was Hogwarts. Minerva McGonagall, now headmistress, offered him his old position. He hesitated at first, afraid that his condition would once again put students at risk. But McGonagall wasn't having it. The world had changed, she told him. It was time he let himself believe it. Wolfsbane potion was easier to access now, and thanks to the reforms being pushed forward, the next generation would grow up in a world where a werewolf teaching at Hogwarts wasn't a scandal. Returning to the castle felt like stepping into another life. The hallways were still scarred from the battle, the air still thick with the ghosts of the past. But the students needed guidance. Many of them had lost family, friends, mentors. They needed someone who understood grief, who knew how to keep moving forward even when everything felt hopeless. And so Remus taught. He wasn't just a professor now, he was a survivor, a symbol of the future they had fought for. And slowly, life moved on. Teddy grew up knowing who his parents were. Andromeda raised him in a home filled with stories of his mother's wild energy and his father's quiet strength. But it was Remus who was there for the small moments, the first words, the first steps, the nightmares that came when the world outside felt too big. He was there for the birthdays, the scraped knees, the days when Teddy's hair turned an alarming shade of green because he was feeling rebellious. He was there when his son first held a wand, when he first asked about the war, when he finally understood the weight of the names he carried. For years, Remus avoided the past, but one day Teddy found an old photograph, 4 young boys laughing in the Hogwarts courtyard. James Potter, with his messy hair and cocky grin, Sirius Black throwing an arm around his best friend's shoulders. Peter Pettigrew, smaller, quieter, but still part of the group. And there, standing beside them, was a younger, unburdened Remus. Teddy asked about them, about the friends his father had lost. And for the first time in years, Remus told their story, not just the tragedy, but the joy, the adventures, the loyalty that had once defined them. The wizarding world changed in ways he never thought possible. The stigma surrounding werewolves began to fade, slowly but surely. Laws were rewritten, opportunities opened up. There were still struggles, still whispers, still doors that remained closed, but there was also hope. And Remus had never allowed himself to hope before. Years passed, and Teddy grew into a young man with his mother's spirit and his father's quiet resilience. He was sorted into Hufflepuff, much to Remus's delight, though he had half expected Gryffindor. He made friends, got into trouble, wrote home with stories that reminded Remus far too much of his own youth. And when he finally graduated, Remus sat in the stands, watching his son step into a world that was kinder than the one he had known. There were still moments of grief, days when the weight of loss felt unbearable. But Remus had learned that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying those memories with him, honoring them not with sorrow, but with the life he continued to build. One evening, as the sun set over Hogwarts, Remus sat by the lake, watching the ripples in the water. Teddy was visiting, chattering excitedly about his new apprenticeship at the ministry, about the girl he had met, about the things he wanted to do. And as Remus listened, he realized something. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving, he was living.